20th century British philosopher Stephen Toulmin noticed that most well-reasoned arguments consist of 6 parts, the 6 parts that you see on the screen. The Toulmin model of argument reinforces what we already know about argument from the classic or Aristotelian model of argument and from our knowledge of good arguments in general. It does add something though, the warrant, which we'll talk about in just a moment, which is really can help us understand the layering of argument and the effects of audience on our arguments. So, generally speaking, a quick overview of the Toulmin model is that Toulmin has the claim or the thesis, which is the point that's being proven or supported. He reminds us that often our claims need to be qualified to make them the best possible claim and the strongest position that we can support. He talks about grounds, which is reasons, data, evidence that we use to build our argument and support our claim. As with other models of argument, Toulmin often recognizes rebuttal, points that the opponents say that we have to bring into our argument and contend with to again make our argument the strongest possible. What Toulmin adds or calls out explicitly that the classic model of argument doesn't is the idea of a warrant. And the warrant is the underlying assumption or the chain of reasoning that connects the grounds to the claim and makes it really serve as valid evidence for the point that we're trying to prove or assert. Toulmin acknowledges that often the warrant is implied. We don't have to state it, it's just there. But he also tells us that our argument is often only as strong as our weakest warrant or underlying assumption. So we want to look at those, even if we don't call them out explicitly on the page or in the argument, to help make sure that our argument is really strong and solid and that the link between the data and the claim is strong. When that doesn't happen, we have this 6th component, which is backing. And that's where we lay our argument. We might bring in evidence and or explanation to help support our warrant so that our data really does help serve as evidence to support our claim or our thesis. There's a lot more detail on this in a handout posted in Blackboard under Writer's Resource. Just look for the Toulmin handout, and I'm going to run you through some more examples here as well. So here's an example of a Toulmin argument where all the pieces are filled out, or most of the pieces are filled out to help you understand them again. And this is a simple argument that we can run through quickly. So here our claim, our thesis, is that universities should not use standardized tests in the admissions process. However, the Toulmin model reminds us that we want to qualify our position so that we have the best possible thesis, the best possible answer to the problem that we're trying to solve. So in this case, we started out with this really strong, never, universities should not use standardized test scores in the admissions process. And as we looked more into the issue, came to understand it better, considered our opposition, we decided to qualify that, to have the strongest thesis. And qualifying your thesis, saying sometimes under these conditions, shifting your position, changing your mind, none of that means that you're not doing your job as a researcher or an argument writer. In fact, it means you are doing your job, that you're really considering the grounds, the reasons, the evidence, the data, understanding the issue as you work through it, and offering the best possible answer to your reader. So now our position is universities should not use standardized tests in the admissions process unless they also offer alternatives or supplements, an example being the portfolio admissions. Again, the Toulmin model contains rebuttal, so it reminds us that we have to look at the opposition. So I've included a couple points of rebuttal here. One, the test isn't biased. It's just that certain demographics have more access to test preparation courses and resources. While Toulmin does not explicitly call out counterargument, refutation, and or concession, it's implied in his discussion of rebuttal, and so we're just going to call it out explicitly in this model. So we're going to add to that we have to handle what our opposition has to say. So in this case, we're basically saying, well, even if you could prove that the test questions are not biased, which you can't, the fact is that access to preparation is still a form of socioeconomic bias. Now, again, what Toulmin adds that's new for us is this idea of a warrant. And again, the warrant is what's often unspoken and assumed underneath this line that holds the grounds to the claim and makes it support the claim or thesis. So in this case, the underlying assumption that we're counting on our readers to buy is that standardized tests should in fact be standard, that they should measure students equally, or that the college admissions process should be fair. If we can assume of reasonable members of our target audience that they believe this, that they want equal access to education or fair college admissions processes, then we don't have to call the warrant out explicitly. We don't have to worry about backing or supporting it. If that's not true, then we'd want to bring in backing and prove that first and convince our reader of that. And that's where we get into the layering of argument. As I said before, we can also look at Toulmin to understand the effects of audience on argument. And for that, we're going to look at a commercial. Okay, advertisers rely on warrants all this time. They understand the values or beliefs that they can assume of their target audience, and they use those as they build ad campaigns or commercials to help sell their product. So in this case, we're going to look at what is maybe a familiar ad to you, but it's a Yoplait yogurt ad campaign. So here it goes. She wore an itsy bitsy teeny weeny yellow polka dot bikini that she wore for the first time today. An itsy bitsy teeny weeny yellow polka dot bikini that she wore for the first time today. New news from Yoplait Light. A clinical study shows it helps you burn more fat and lose more weight than just cutting calories alone. She wore an itsy bitsy teeny weeny Yoplait Light. Burn more fat, lose more weight. So for now, I've stripped this Toulmin argument down to just the very basics, just so we can focus on warrants and audience. So obviously in that ad campaign, their claim is you should buy our yogurt. Okay. The evidence that they provide is because yogurt can help you burn more fat and lose more weight. And this is where we look at audience. So I'm going to say that the target audience for this ad campaign is American women from their 20s on up through middle age. Okay, so 20s plus. What the Toulmin model of argument tells us is that the warrant, again, that underlying assumption that's helping the evidence support the claim, or in this case, helping their data sell yogurt, is whatever we're assuming, whatever's kind of hidden under the argument. In this case, the warrant is you, target audience, want to lose weight or be thin. So if they got the warrant right, which I'm going to assert that they did, and pardon me if that's a little bit of gender stereotyping, then their data supports their claim and they sell yogurt. They never need to call that out. In fact, it's probably to their benefit to not say, hey, you want to lose weight, you need to be thin. So they don't have to worry about the backing or any of those other components of argument that we've looked at. So, what we're going to do in class this week is you need to come in prepared to be a Yoplait intern. So your internship supervisor is going to ask you to create a new commercial, but based on that concept of the ad that we watched, to sell yogurt to a drastically different audience. So you want to be prepared to imagine a different audience and think about some ways that you might shift some of that ad campaign keeping in mind warrants and some of the other aspects that we've talked about of a Toulmin argument to help yolk clay continue to sell yogurt.